On a cool spring afternoon in London's Hyde Park, where the air smelled faintly of fresh grass and distant flowers, a gentle breeze danced across the lake, creating shimmering ripples that caught the soft golden light of the afternoon sun. And it was on this ordinary yet strangely magical day that Sarah, a quiet, warm-hearted girl with a camera always hanging around her neck, walked slowly along the curved pathway, trying to capture the peaceful beauty of nature after a long, stressful week at work, unaware that her life was about to shift in a way she had never imagined. As she wandered near the old willow tree, her favorite spot in the park because of how its branches fell like a curtain of soft green silk, she noticed that the clouds above were gathering, promising rain even though the weather forecast insisted it would stay clear. And just as she reached the willow tree, the first drop of rain landed gently on her cheek, followed by another, and another, until the sky opened up, sending people around her running in all directions, laughing, shouting, or scrambling to find shelter. But Sarah simply slipped under the willow's hanging branches, letting them shield her like a natural umbrella, and she smiled softly to herself, thinking how much she had always loved rain. She raised her camera to take a picture of the raindrops falling into the lake when suddenly, from the corner of her eye, she noticed a tall figure rushing toward the same tree, Daniel, a young man with kind brown eyes and a calm expression, holding a notebook over his head as he sprinted through the downpour, looking for shelter. And as he reached the willow tree he paused, slightly breathless, brushing the wet hair from his forehead, only to realize he wasn't alone. And when his eyes met Sarah's for the first time, something warm and unexpected flickered between them, like a spark lit by the rain itself. He gave a shy apologetic smile and said softly, "Sorry, didn't know someone was already here." But Sarah shook her head gently, replying, "It's okay, we can share." And for a moment they stood there, both smiling awkwardly, the rain forming a soft curtain around them while the willow tree created a cozy little world just for two strangers. Daniel finally relaxed and stood beside her, close enough to sense her presence but not too close to make things uncomfortable. And after a few quiet moments he nodded toward her camera and said, "You like taking pictures?" His voice warm, curious, genuinely interested. And Sarah, surprised that someone actually noticed her camera instead of assuming she was just another passerby, replied with a small laugh, "Yeah, I guess it helps me slow down life a little." To which Daniel responded, "I write for the same reason," lifting his notebook slightly, the pages slightly wet at the edges, making her smile instantly, and just like that, something gentle and effortless settled between them. They began talking about little things, favorite places in London, why they both loved rainy days, the simple joy of nature. And although they were strangers, the conversation flowed with the kind of ease that felt rare and precious, as if the willow tree itself had woven a quiet bond around them. Sarah noticed how calm Daniel's voice was, how he listened carefully, how he smiled with his eyes more than his lips, and Daniel noticed how Sarah's laugh held softness and honesty, how she talked with passion about photography, how her presence felt strangely comforting even though he had only known her for minutes. The rain continued falling, heavier at times, lighter at others, but neither of them seemed in a hurry to leave as the world outside their small shelter blurred into shades of gray and silver, making the moment feel timeless. And at one point the breeze pushed the willow branches aside, letting a few drops of rain slip through, landing gently on Sarah's shoulder, prompting Daniel instinctively lift his notebook above her to shield her, an unplanned gesture that made her heart flutter ever so slightly, and though he quickly realized what he had done and pulled back with an embarrassed smile, she felt something warm spreading through her chest, a feeling she hadn't experienced in a long time. Eventually, when the rain softened into a gentle drizzle, Daniel looked out and said, "Looks like it's slowing down." But Sarah, feeling a strange sense of not wanting this moment to end, whispered almost unconsciously, "Just a little longer." And he heard it, smiled softly, and stayed right where he was. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't planned, it wasn't anything like the romance novels she read or the movies he watched. It was simple, quiet, ordinary yet magical. And when the rain finally stopped and they realized they had spent nearly an hour together under the willow tree, Daniel hesitated for a moment before saying, "Can I maybe take you for a coffee sometime?" His voice unsure but hopeful, and Sarah, feeling her heart beating a little faster, nodded without even thinking twice, replying, "I'd like that." And as they stepped out from under the willow tree, sunlight breaking gently through the clouds, both of them felt it. Something had begun, something neither could quite explain, something that felt like the first soft turning of fate. Over the next few days, Sarah found herself replaying small moments from the willow tree meeting. Daniel's shy smile, the way he shielded her with his notebook, the gentle tone in his voice when he spoke about writing. And although she tried to convince herself it was just a random encounter, something inside her kept circling back to him, to the quiet magic of that rain-soaked hour. Meanwhile, Daniel couldn't stop thinking about the girl with the camera, the way her eyes softened when she talked about slowing down life through photographs, the way her laughter sounded like warmth breaking through cloudy days. And even though he usually avoided overthinking new people, Sarah felt different. Unexpected, refreshing, like someone he had unknowingly been waiting to meet. 2 days after their first meeting, they finally met again for the coffee he had asked for, at a small cafe tucked between a flower shop and an old bookstore in South Kensington. A place Daniel had chosen intentionally, because it felt calm, cozy, and beautifully ordinary, just like the moment they'd shared. When Sarah arrived, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear as she stepped inside, Daniel stood up immediately, smiling with equal parts nervousness and excitement. And she smiled back, feeling strangely comfortable as if they had met more than once. They ordered 2 cappuccinos, hers with a sprinkle of cinnamon, his plain, and chose a corner table near the window, where sunlight fell in soft golden patches across the wooden floor. And for a moment they just sat there, taking each other in, both feeling a quiet anticipation that neither wanted to rush. Their conversation began simply, work, hobbies, favorite places in London. But every small detail they shared seemed to open another door, revealing pieces of who they were. And Sarah found herself telling him how she loved taking pictures of unnoticed things, cracked pavements, quiet benches, old street lamps, because she believed beauty lived in the overlooked corners of life. And Daniel listened with an attentiveness that surprised her, as if he genuinely wanted to understand her world. While in return he shared that he wrote short stories, mostly characters who felt too much or wanted too much. Stories he never showed anyone because he was afraid of being misunderstood. But somehow, telling Sarah didn't scare him. The more they talked, the more their initial awkwardness faded, replaced by a gentle warmth that made them laugh easily, lean closer unconsciously, and forget about the world outside the cafe. After coffee, Daniel asked if she wanted to walk for a bit, and Sarah hesitated only for a heartbeat before agreeing. Because even though she couldn't explain it, being near him felt calm in a way she rarely experienced. They walked through quiet streets lined with red brick houses, talking about the most random things, childhood memories, songs they secretly listened to, embarrassing moments they usually wouldn't share with someone new. But everything came out naturally, without fear or judgment, as if they were discovering not just facts about each other, but familiar pieces of themselves reflected in someone else. At one point Sarah stopped to take a photo of a small white cat sitting on a brick wall, and Daniel watched her with a soft expression, noticing how focused she became, how her eyes narrowed slightly and then softened again when she found the right angle. And he realized he liked watching her see the world, because her gaze made ordinary things look meaningful. When she caught him staring, he quickly pretended to be looking at the flowers behind her, making her laugh, and that laugh wrapped around his heart in a way he wasn't prepared for. As they walked, their shoulders occasionally brushed, each touch sending a subtle wave through both of them. And while neither reached for the other's hand yet, the thought hovered closely, quietly between them. When they reached the park entrance, the same Hyde Park where they first met, Daniel paused and asked softly, "Want to go inside?" And Sarah, feeling an unexpected flutter of nostalgia, nodded. The willow tree stood exactly as they had left it, silent and ancient, and even though the sky was clear this time, its branches still held the memory of rain, of the moment that began everything. They didn't go under the tree this time, just stood near it, both smiling at the unspoken memory, and Daniel said, "I'm glad it rained that day," making Sarah's heart skip just a little. They spent another hour talking under the soft afternoon sun, watching ducks glide across the lake, sharing stories they hadn't planned to tell, and somewhere in the middle of a conversation about their favorite books, Daniel realized he wasn't just learning facts about her. He was slowly learning her rhythms, her reactions, the softness in her voice when she talked about things she loved, and Sarah realized Daniel had a way of speaking that made even simple sentences feel meaningful, as if he carried a quiet depth she wanted to understand more. By the time they finally walked out of the park, the breeze had grown cooler, and Sarah, who had forgotten to bring a jacket, crossed her arms lightly, trying to hide the shiver. But Daniel noticed instantly and without saying a word took off his own jacket and draped it gently over her shoulders, and the gesture, simple, soft, natural, sent warmth spreading through her chest. Not because she needed the jacket, but because he noticed without being asked. They stood near the bus stop, unsure how to end the day that didn't feel like a first date, but something more delicate, more meaningful, and Daniel, nervous but sincere, said softly, "Can we meet again?" And Sarah, feeling her heart blooming quietly, nodded with a smile that said far more than words ever could. When they finally parted ways, walking in opposite directions, both of them felt a lightness, a quiet excitement, a sense that something gently beautiful had begun. And even though they had only just started knowing each other, it already felt like the beginning of something they both hoped would never end. Over the next several weeks, Sarah and Daniel slipped into each other's lives with a gentle ease that neither of them had expected, and what started as simple meetings slowly blossomed into something that felt like the most natural rhythm in the world. Their first official date happened at a small botanical garden near Richmond, a place Daniel had chosen because he remembered how Sarah talked about wanting to photograph flowers after rain, and that tiny detail, that he remembered something so small, touched her more deeply than she could admit. And when she arrived, wearing a light blue dress that swayed softly in the breeze, Daniel felt something warm settle in his chest, a mixture of admiration, attraction, and something tender he couldn't quite name yet. They wandered through the garden paths, surrounded by rows of blooming roses, lilies, and delicate wildflowers, and Sarah stopped every few minutes to capture something with her camera, while Daniel watched her with a gentle fondness that grew each time he saw her smile after taking a perfect shot. At one point she showed him a picture she had taken of a butterfly resting on a yellow petal, and Daniel, instead of looking at the photo first, looked at her, noticing the excitement in her eyes, the way her lips curved upward, the way sunlight danced across her face, and when she realized he was staring, a blush crept across her cheeks, making him look away with a shy grin, and though neither of them said it aloud, something between them shifted, soft, subtle, but unmistakably deeper. After the garden, they had lunch at a riverside café, where ducks glided across the calm water and sunlight sparkled on the ripples, and they talked for hours, about fears, dreams, favorite childhood memories, and even the kind of future they imagined for themselves one day. And even though it was still early in their connection, the honesty they shared felt like threads quietly weaving something strong, something real. By their second date, they already had an effortless familiarity, choosing to meet at a small bookshop cafe where Daniel read her one of his short stories for the first time, his voice trembling slightly from nerves, and Sarah listened with full attention, her heart swelling at the vulnerability he showed her, and when he finished, she told him gently, "You write emotions like you've lived 1,000 lives." And Daniel, unused to such sincere praise, felt something inside him melt in a way he couldn't quite describe. They spent the rest of that afternoon reading poetry aloud, sharing soft laughter, shoulders touching occasionally, those small accidental brushes carrying electricity that both felt but neither rushed. Their third date was more spontaneous, walks along the Thames, street food shared under fairy lights, a moment where Sarah lost her balance on a cobblestone path and Daniel caught her waist with both hands, pulling her closer than ever before. Their faces inches apart, breaths mingling for a heartbeat that felt too intimate to forget. And though they didn't kiss yet, the tension between them tightened gently, sweetly, like a promise waiting for the right moment. And as their dates continued, each one more natural than the last, they found themselves drawn deeper into each other's worlds. Sarah inviting Daniel to a small art exhibit where she displayed some of her photographs, and Daniel standing proudly beside her the entire evening, watching her glow as people admired her work, feeling strangely protective and yet endlessly inspired by her passion. Daniel later took her to his favorite quiet rooftop overlooking the city, where he often went to write, and when Sarah stood there with wind playing through her hair, city lights flickering in her eyes, he couldn't resist capturing that moment in words, jotting down a line in his notebook while she looked out at London's skyline, unaware that she had become his favorite sight. Sometimes their dates were simple, movie nights at her place with a blanket thrown over them, shared popcorn, her leaning gently against his shoulder without even realizing it. Other times they were adventures, long bus rides to places neither had been, laughing at maps they couldn't read, taking wrong turns but enjoying every moment because they were together. With each passing day, their comfort with each other deepened so naturally that it felt almost unreal, like they had known each other long before fate brought them under the willow tree. Sarah began to notice the small things about Daniel. How he ran his fingers through his hair when he was thinking, how he smiled more with one side of his mouth when he was teasing her, how he had a habit of looking at her first whenever something funny or beautiful happened, as if her reaction mattered more than the moment itself. And Daniel, too, learned her rhythms, the way she hummed softly while editing her photos, how her eyes softened when she talked about her mother, how she bit her lip when she was shy, how she tucked her hair behind her ear when nervous, and every small detail became a new reason for him to fall deeper. One evening, after a long day, they found themselves sitting by the river, the sky painted in shades of orange and pink, and for the first time, Daniel reached for her hand. Not quickly, not dramatically, but softly, hesitantly, giving her every chance to pull away. Yet Sarah, without thinking, intertwined her fingers with his, and the simple act sent a warm wave through both of them, sealing a silent understanding that their hearts were no longer wandering alone. As the sky darkened and city lights shimmered on the water, Sarah rested her head on his shoulder. Daniel leaned, his cheek strength behind Sarah's gentle nature, the way she comforted people with soft words, the way she calmed storms without raising her voice, the way she carried so much kindness without tiring of it. And Sarah, in return, found herself drawn to the depth behind Daniel's quiet personality, the way he saw stories in everything, the way he expressed emotions in poetry when he couldn't say them aloud, the way he made her feel understood without explanations. And slowly, beautifully, their love deepened into a bond that felt both peaceful and electric at the same time. One night, after an exhausting week for both of them, Daniel invited Sarah to his favorite rooftop, the same place he had once taken her during their early dates. But this time the moment held a different weight, a deeper familiarity, because now she was not just a girl he liked. She was the person he was learning to build a life around. They sat side by side wrapped under a single blanket, the city lights shimmering like fallen stars beneath them. And for a long time they didn't talk, just watched the world breathe quietly, feeling a sense of belonging that didn't need words. Eventually Sarah rested her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat, slow and steady beneath her ear, and Daniel wrapped an arm around her, holding her with a tenderness that felt like a promise, soft, fragile, but deeply sincere. As the breeze brushed past them, Sarah whispered softly, "I feel safe with you." And Daniel, who rarely spoke big emotional truths, kissed her forehead gently and said, "I feel whole with you." And in that moment their hearts aligned with a clarity that left them both breathless. As days continued, they experienced their first real challenges, misunderstandings, small arguments, moments of insecurity. But instead of pulling apart, they learned how to talk, how to listen, how to soften instead of harden, how to strength behind Sarah's gentle nature, the way she comforted people with soft words, the way she calmed storms without raising her voice, the way she carried so much kindness without tiring of it. And Sarah, in return, found herself drawn to the depth behind Daniel's quiet personality, the way he saw stories in everything, the way he expressed emotions in poetry when he couldn't say them aloud, the way he made her feel understood without explanations. And slowly, beautifully, their love deepened into a bond that felt both peaceful and electric at the same time. One night, after an exhausting week for both of them, Daniel invited Sarah to his favorite rooftop, the same place he had once taken her during their early dates. But this time the moment held a different weight, a deeper familiarity, because now she was not just a girl he liked. She was the person he was learning to build a life around. They sat side by side wrapped under a single blanket, the city lights shimmering like fallen stars beneath them. And for a long time they didn't talk, just watched the world breathe quietly, feeling a sense of belonging that didn't need words. Eventually Sarah rested her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat, slow and steady beneath her ear, and Daniel wrapped an arm around her, holding her with a tenderness that felt like a promise. Soft, fragile, but deeply sincere. As the breeze brushed past them, Sarah whispered softly, "I feel safe with you." And Daniel, who rarely spoke big emotional truths, kissed her forehead gently and said, "I feel whole with you." And in that moment their hearts aligned with a clarity that left them both breathless. As days continued, they experienced their first real challenges, misunderstandings, small arguments, moments of insecurity. But instead of pulling apart, they learned how to talk, how to listen, how to soften instead of harden, how to meet in the middle without losing themselves. And every time they worked through a problem together, their connection only grew stronger, warmer, more resilient. Daniel learned to understand Sarah's tendency to overthink, comforting her with steady words and soft reassurances, while Sarah learned to read Daniel's silences, knowing when he needed space and when he needed to be held. And these lessons, these tiny yet powerful acts of love, became the glue of their growing relationship. One evening, after a particularly emotional day for Sarah, Daniel arrived at her door without warning, holding her favorite dark chocolate cake and a small envelope with a handwritten note that simply said, "You don't have to be strong today. Let me be strong for you." And as she read it, tears filled her eyes, not from sadness but from the overwhelming realization that she had someone who genuinely wanted to hold her heart gently. She hugged him tightly, burying her face in his shoulder, and Daniel wrapped his arms around her with a depth of care that made the world feel quiet again. Their love began to seep into every corner of their lives. Friends noticed the glow on Sarah's face, the softness in Daniel's tone whenever he said her name. Their families noticed the spark in their eyes when they talked about the other. And even strangers passing by saw the way their hands always found each other, how their steps synced naturally, as if their bodies knew they belonged together before their minds fully understood it. One weekend, Daniel took Sarah on a surprise trip outside London, to a small countryside and surrounded by fields of tall grass and distant hills. And during a quiet morning walk, with dew still clinging to the ground and birds singing softly in the distance, Daniel gently pulled Sarah toward him, wrapping his arms around her as she laughed lightly, and for a long moment they simply held each other, breathing in the warmth of a love that felt pure, certain, and beautifully inevitable. That night, while lying under a sky full of stars Sarah tried to capture with her camera, and stars Daniel tried to capture in words, they realized something neither had said yet but both had been feeling. This wasn't just dating anymore. This was the beginning of forever. The kind of love that grows stronger with every sunrise, every mistake, every shared breath. And though neither said "I love you" that night, their hearts whispered it with every touch, every glance, every heartbeat that echoed quietly in the darkness as they held each other under the vast, endless sky, unknowingly stepping into the chapter where love becomes not just something felt, but something lived. Under the soft glow of the setting sun, as the golden light shimmered through the leaves of the same willow tree where their story had first begun, Maya and Arjun stood hand in hand, hearts trembling with the weight of everything that had led them to this moment. Every glance, every accidental smile, every late-night conversation, every hesitation turned courage, every fear softened by love. Today wasn't just a wedding. It was the quiet, powerful victory of two souls who had chosen each other. Again and again, a promise whispered long before words were ever spoken. And as Maya walked toward Arjun in her simple pastel sari, the breeze gently lifting its edges like nature itself blessing her, Arjun felt like he was seeing the world finally fall into place. Her eyes sparkling like liquid warmth, her smile soft but filled with certainty, her footsteps slow yet confident, each one echoing in his heart like a vow already fulfilled. And when she reached him, he exhaled the breath he didn't realize he had been holding, his trembling fingers lifting her veil as she looked up at him with a tenderness so deep it felt like silence had turned into poetry. The priest began the ceremony, his voice steady, but Maya and Arjun barely heard anything except each other's heartbeat, because in this moment time wasn't passing, it was pausing for them. And as Arjun tied the sacred thread around her neck, his hands shaking not from fear, but from a love that felt too big for his chest, Maya felt tears warming her cheeks, not of sadness but of gratitude. Gratitude that destiny had been gentle, that love had been patient, that their hearts had been brave, and when they circled the holy fire, each step felt like walking through the memories of their journey. Their first awkward hello under the willow tree, their shared jokes on the lakeside, the nervous excitement of their first date, the quiet confessions under the night sky, the growing ease of being home in each other's presence, and the thousand little moments that slowly taught them that love wasn't loud. It was steady, it was constant. It was choosing the same person every day even when the world felt uncertain. And when Arjun finally held Maya's hands for the last vow, his voice cracked as he whispered that he would protect her smile, honor her dreams, and love her with a loyalty deeper than a lifetime, while Maya promised to stand by him through every season. Summer laughter, autumn changes, winter storms, and spring beginnings. And as soon as the vows ended, the soft drizzle that had been threatening finally began, raindrops falling gently around them like blessings from the sky. And everyone rushed to open umbrellas, but Maya and Arjun didn't move. Instead they laughed, holding each other under the rain, remembering the very first day they met when Maya's scarf had flown across the park and landed in his hands, as if the universe had offered her heart to him before she ever did. And now standing in the rain again felt like the world coming full circle, like destiny smiling quietly from the clouds. The guests cheered, petals flew through the air, and Maya's younger cousins danced around them, while Arjun's parents wiped tears of joy, finally seeing the happiness they had always wished for their son. Yet in the middle of all the celebrations, Maya and Arjun saw only each other, because love had made their world small and infinite at the same time. Later that night, when the lights dimmed and the noise softened into a distant hum, Arjun pulled Maya close, touching her forehead gently with his as he whispered, "I loved you long before I knew your name," and she whispered back with a trembling smile, "And I'll love you long after forever ends." And in that moment they weren't husband and wife just by ceremony. They were soulmates bound by a story that began with a falling scarf and now continued with a lifetime of holding each other through laughter, storms, dreams, and everything in between.